Rod, it's great to have you back. Welcome, my friend.
Great to be here.
As you know, Rod, I've been here in Texas for the past 2 weeks or so, trying to help with this campaign. We call it the Save Texas, Save America campaign. You can find out much more about it at bansharia.com, as I mentioned. But, Rod, the president has laid down some very important markers about this idea of Sharia and the threat that it poses to us and, well, to Western civilization more generally. He's talked, for example, in his national security strategy, as you know, about civilization erasure over there in particularly Western Europe and the British Isles. Um, he's not been as clear of late about its presence in our country, quite notably and increasingly manifestly in Texas. Um, do you think this will come up, and should it?
Well, earlier in your remarks, you were saying, this is a promise he has made, but so far has not kept. The thing about Donald Trump is he gets to all of them. And we certainly saw that in the first term. We certainly saw that last year. He made a bunch. He's got a lot of priorities. And like Santa, he's made his list and he's checking it twice. These things get knocked off. And I give you a perfect example, which is his promise at the beginning of his term in 2016, 2017, when he said that he was going to repeal 2 federal regulations for every 1 new one. Well, that turned out to be 22 federal regulations for every 1 new one. Now, in the second term, we're up to 100 regulations being repealed for every 1 new one. This is a guy who over-delivers. So I think we will get what we want. We might not get it in the State of the Union. I wish he would link the problem of Sharia here domestically, not just to illegal immigration, but also to the Iran crisis. Because the truth is, Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism on planet Earth. During the Cold War, that title went to the Soviet Union, but the Islamic Republic has more than made up for it. And this is really the thing. When you see Hamas act, you're really seeing the Ayatollah act. When you see Hezbollah act, you're really seeing the Ayatollah act. And when you're seeing a lot of the things we're seeing that are so disturbing in Texas and other parts of the United States, you're really seeing the Ayatollah act. He's not the only bad guy, but he's the biggest. And we're about to make his life very hard. So I hope the president will connect the dots.
Well, we certainly expect him to talk about the Iran situation. When you say you expect him to make the Ayatollah's life very hard, that seems to imply, at least, that the deal that we are still seeing Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and Steve Witkoff, his special envoy, beavering away at with the Iranians. Are you presuming that that will prove futile, as it has in the past, and that President Trump will recognize that it's time to exercise the military options that he has put into place? And if so, how do you think that will play out?
I think it will turn out exactly the way it turned out in Venezuela and in Iran last summer. You will recall that he tweeted that they had 60 days to make a deal. And on day 61, the 12-day war commenced. So, he actually does have a timeline and he actually knows what needs to happen here. Obviously, if we could negotiate these guys' exit, it would be better. You don't want to send troops in to get baby Doc Duvalier. You want him to live in a mansion on the French Riviera and get rid of him. It's just cleaner and there's less blood and it's better all around. But these guys aren't going anywhere. There's not a chance in the world. They are 12ers. Your audience knows, most audiences don't, that 12ers are a particular sect of Shia Islam that believe not only that there's a Messiah they call the Mahdi who's going to come back, but that it's their duty.
From a well he's lived in for 1,200 years, by the way.
But they have a duty to burn down the world, to bring in the apocalypse. that allows the return of the Mahdi. This is crazy talk. Now, if Baptist Sunday school ladies talk about Jesus returning next Tuesday, that's one thing. These guys are saying, let's nuke the world so that the Mahdi can return. So this is an existential threat. If you let them get nuclear weapons, if you let them get ballistic missiles, they're not going to be deterred in the way the Soviet Union was by any kind of mutual assured destruction. We have a long discussion about the different philosophies of use of nuclear weapons between the Soviets and the United States and the Chinese, and that's all interesting. But at the end of the day, it turned out the Soviets were rational enough to not want to all die. And the Iranians don't care. So hundreds of thousands back in the streets. The Lion and Sun revolution is a real thing. And I think help is just about to arrive.
So let's drill down just a little bit on that, Rod. We're going to have to do it on the other side of a short break, but I want to get at this idea that MAGA, we're told, is not enthusiastic about this, that it's likely, they believe, to translate into an endless war, boots on the ground, and embroiling us in another nation's affairs when we've got an awful lot of other problems here at home. Presumably, the president will be addressing those misgivings, and I'm, for one, very keen to see him do so decisively. We'll be right back with the great Rod Martin right after this. Stay tuned. We're back, and so is Rod Martin, the author of The Rod Martin Report. You can subscribe and benefit enormously from its insights at rodmartin.org. Rod, you were talking a little bit about Iran in the State of the Union, and I wanted just to, tease out a little bit further what is in prospect here. I'm personally very much of the view that we ought to be helping the people of Iran liberate themselves from this regime, and that we can do that without a large, presence of American boots on the ground, as they say, without becoming embroiled in a forever war and all of the other things that are putatively on the line here if the president goes down this road. What are your thoughts about the possibilities of not only removing this particular Ayatollah, the Grand Ayatollah, but enough of the cohort around him, most especially the security apparatus that keeps them all in business, to effect the liberation of the people of Iran? And is there a concern on your part that what we might see, as you sort of indicated, or at least implied in your comment about a reprise of the Venezuela operation, is that you could see perhaps the decapitation of the Grand Ayatollah, the Uberführer, if you will, in favor of his deputies or, others in the current regime's food chain? And would that be an acceptable outcome, sir?
I don't want to predict too closely what the president has in mind. I'll just put it this way. The Pentagon gave him plans he didn't find to be adequate, and he demanded that they respond with plans for decisive action. Decisive action. So this is a president who does not want to send in ground troops. That's a given. And we didn't in Venezuela. I mean, not in any meaningful sense. Obviously, there were some guys on the ground for a minute, and there might be operators virtually anywhere at any moment. But some big invasion, 250,000 men occupying Iran for the next 20 years, not ever going to happen. However, you don't need them. There are hundreds of thousands of Iranians in the streets right now. There is a complete delegitimization of the regime, not least in the most practical way. The currency has collapsed. The banking system has collapsed. People can't get electricity. People can't feed themselves. That is not a stable regime. So I don't know exactly what the president has in mind. He clearly has in mind something once again, decisive, which I assume is a coordinated air campaign, some special ops, some Mossad action. I think every second person in Iran is part of Mossad. And we're going to get there. I really think we get this done. The people are fed up. They want a free future and a free Iran. We're going to publish an article, I don't know when, sometime soon, on Iran as the greatest investment opportunity of the 2030s. And the reason is Iran is an amazing country, an incredibly wealthy country that is living under a medieval tyranny suppressed by socialism and completely kept from reaching its potential. And if you turn that tap on, Iran not only becomes a great ally to the United States and a pretty good ally to Israel, but it absolutely eliminates most of the bad actors in the region, and you can actually get to that regional peace that Donald Trump wants so badly. So this is a boon to the world, and then when you add to that all of these brilliant, capable, highly educated people being liberated to be the entrepreneurs that they were born to be, Iran is going to be a tremendous force for good in the world.
Yeah. Well, as they say, from your lips to God's ears, I firmly believe that's so and pray that it is what eventuates. Let me just ask you about one thing, Rod. You touched on it before the break, that the people of Iran are at a desperate disadvantage because they do not have a Second Amendment right, needless to say, or the arms that would flow from it. Interestingly enough, I was speaking with Abtin Vizari the other day, a man who hails from Iran originally. He's an American citizen now. He's running for Congress, as a matter of fact, in the 32nd District of Texas. And he said that something like 700 plus mosques have been burned in the protests in Iran. And it's led me to the surmise that one of the things going on there is not just the really incredibly pent-up fury that I think the majority of Iranians feel towards Sharia supremacy and Islam as practiced by these ayatollahs, but that, as has been true, I think, from Muhammad's time, these mosques are, well, in the modern parlance, I think we'd call them multi-use facilities, and that in addition to doing some, ritual prayer practice and the like, it's a community center, and not least, it's an arsenal. And it is used for not only weapons storage, but training and preparations for their use in raids or, jihadist attacks of some other kind. Do you think that that's going on there, perhaps, that people have been liberating weapons and taking these mosques down? But also, Rod, going back to what we talked about at the beginning of the show, this prospect that there are arsenals in at least some of the mosques in this country.
There are, and this is pretty standard practice in a lot of these places. The Iranians, by which I mean Hamas, because those two things have no real distinction. Hamas did the exact same thing in Gaza. That's exactly how they trapped Israel into looking like the bad guy in a lot of these cases. They had converted mosques and Christian churches and hospitals into arsenals and missile sites and all kinds of things, which completely violates the Geneva Convention. It's completely in violation of international law, and it makes all of those sites legitimate, internationally legal targets. So, yes, I suspect you're describing what's happening accurately as to the people of Iran going after some of these mosques, but even that hides a much bigger story. Iranian government data says that of 75,000 mosques in Iran over the last few years, 50,000 have closed. That's amazing. I mean, can you imagine 2/3 or so of the churches in America just shutting down in a short period of time? This suggests strongly exactly what you said, that This government has told its people that they are the definition of Islam, and the people have taken them seriously. Again, Iranian government data from 2023 show that more than 50% of Iranians are now non-religious. There are significant growth curves for Zoroastrianism, which is the ancient religion of Persia, but also for Christianity, which has really been growing like a weed. So there's a tremendous opportunity here for in the most positive sense, a secular democracy, probably a constitutional monarchy like the one Juan Carlos I created in Spain and transitioned very quickly to a parliamentary system. That's probably where we're headed if we can just dislodge these guys. And I think we can. I think the president intends to.
Well, this is, of course, going to be one of the most interesting parts of the speech is how he lays that out and the extent to which he signals not just that it's an option, but that it is very much what he has in mind, namely the liberation of the people of Iran at long last, to their benefit, of course, but I believe very much to that of, well, our friends and allies and interests in the region, but also for us here at home. Rod, we have to take another break. We'll be right back with more with Rod Martin about perhaps the unraveling of BRICS. Stay tuned. We're back, and so is Rod Martin for one more segment. I'm delighted to say we're going to be talking in this one about a very interesting development. Rod is often looking over the horizon at developments that are opaque to the rest of us. He often gets them right. He almost always is more optimistic than I generally am. And I think for most of us who may not have quite the longer range view that Rod brings to these topics, but it's always fascinating to read what he's reporting on at Rod Martin Report. And you can find it once again at rodmartin.org. But also what he shares with us on this program each week. And I'm so grateful for you doing so, Rod. So I did want to pick up on one of the topics on the report as we speak, and it's a very provocative proposition, and that is that India is now seizing so-called ghost tankers that various nations, I guess, have been using to circumvent sanctions on Iran primarily. To some extent, it's been going on in connection with sanctions on Venezuelan oil as well. Talk to us about what is afoot here with not just the United States Navy, but also the Indian one, intercepting and seizing some of these assets with presumably mostly their holds filled with oil that is not supposed to be on the market. And most especially, if we are going to see more of this kind of, what should we call it, law enforcement action, what does it portend for this sort of rather large and growing number of nations which have been thrown in under the banner of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa?
This is a very quiet tsunami. And it really, if you blinked, you missed it, because the Indian Ministry of Defense posted this and then took it down within an hour. So somebody higher up realized that that was a dumb idea and they got rid of it, but they didn't stop doing what they were doing that they had reported. So what is that? Well, the Indian Navy went out and interdicted a bunch of shadow fleet oil tankers. And you say, well, okay, that doesn't sound like that big a deal. Oh, that's a huge, hairy deal. Because as you've just mentioned, India is the I in BRICS. The R is Russia. The C is China. And This is a complete 180 for the Indians. They have been buying an insane amount of shadow fleet delivered oil, especially from Russia, not just from Russia. And of course, these tankers may or may not have been bound for China. China actually imports 90% of Iran's oil by some estimates, and 48% of Russia's exports as well. So, okay, all those tankers pretty much have to sail past India. If the Indian Navy is in the business of shutting that down, this is whiplash. You've gone from India being one of the chief profiteers from the discounted sanctioned oil they've been receiving from these rogue states to one of the enforcers that shuts it down. And of course, we already saw what happens in the Caribbean when you shut it down as to Venezuela. Cuba's on the ropes. I don't know how they get out of their trouble other than just crying uncle. And certainly that's where the administration is headed with them. So you've already got that going. But if you shut off 90% of Iran's oil exports, even if there's no war, that regime is not going to last. And of course, Russia can't afford its war in Ukraine either. And I've been talking to you about this for months, that this was Trump's stick to go with his negotiation carrot. And I think he had more hopes for the carrot than some of us did, but he always had the stick. And here it is. Okay, but
now this is with respect to Russia and Ukraine?
Yes, but the big loser is China, because China has been benefiting tremendously from all this steeply discounted oil coming from these rogue producers through the shadow fleet. Now, if the United States is at a point where it is interdicting and seizing tankers, not just in the Caribbean, also in the Atlantic, also in the Indian Ocean, we're actually going after this. It doesn't take more than a few for the economics to become impossible. These captains have to be able to be insurable. They have to actually have a reasonable chance of delivering their cargo and making a profit and going back for the next one. This is catastrophic for that whole system. And then if you add in a few NATO allies, which we're seeing kind of sporadically, and then the Indian Navy, this is over. And China is going to have to buy its oil on the open market at full price, which dries up one of its most important illicit trade advantages. So from beginning to end, this is a global earthquake, and its epicenter is in the heart of BRICS. BRICS, of course, is supposed to be displacing America and overturning the dollar and blah, blah, blah. No, you guys can't keep it together. This isn't going to happen. So this is a big day. And, maybe the Indians flip back next Tuesday. You never know. And Frank, better than anybody, that India is an extraordinarily old civilization, but a terribly new country, and its foreign policy shows it. They are frequently very petulant, petty, and prideful in a way that makes them do things just to antagonize the United States. But what seems to be happening here, because they signed the trade deal on the 2nd of February and started interdicting Russian tankers on the 5th of February, what seems to be happening here is a quiet, long-term shift toward the United States, deepening the Quad surrounding China. So my last point on that is pretty simple. Maybe the CCP shouldn't have attacked India that one last time, because clearly payback's not going to be fun.
Yeah, big time. Rod, I think you sort of, in passing there, alluded to a very important other weapon in Donald Trump's quiver, and that has been these tariffs that he has imposed in a rather dramatic way, I think it's fair to say, over the past year or so now. Talk to us about the impact of this Supreme Court ruling and his response to it.
I know it won't shock you that I've spent a lot of the last several days talking about exactly this. The net on the Supreme Court's decision is not primarily that they overturned the IEEPA specific tariffs. They took a very narrow textual view that because the word tariff didn't appear in the act, never mind that it gives the president tremendously broad powers to regulate trade, to impose licensing and fees and all kinds of things, even completely blockade countries. Nevertheless, even $1 of tariff is not permitted because the word doesn't appear in the act. Okay, that's fine. I can point to at least 5 other acts where the word does appear. And this was kind of the big takeaway that most of the media missed. We have a 9-0 ruling from the Supreme Court spread across, concurring opinions and the dissent for the idea that all those other tariff powers delegated to the president are completely legitimate and constitutional. So my guess is, well, you've already seen some of the new tariffs. Trump already imposed 122 tariffs. That's short term. That'll have to be replaced. That gives you the opportunity to come in and do the 302 investigations, and then you hit them with those. But ultimately, the real hammer is the 338 tariffs that no president has ever used, but were enacted in the Tariff Act of 1930. Under Section 338, the president can impose up to a 50% tariff on anybody without a time limit for national security reasons. Well, all of this is for national security reasons. So bottom line, all he has to do is maintain those many different powers. And some of them were completely unaffected, like, aluminum tariffs, steel tariffs. That's all under separate legislation. Supreme Court didn't question it at all. So under all of that, all he has to do is maintain his position long enough to get inked trade deals. And then it's no longer a matter of U.S. law. It's a matter of a contract the United States has entered into with foreign powers. And that's all game on. So nobody's getting off easy here. And the Trump agenda is going to roll forward.
I was listening to, I think it was National Public Radio, that was interviewing the attorney who brought the case on behalf of the various plaintiffs who succeeded in getting 6 Supreme Court justices to support their position. The question was, so now that the president has started doing these workarounds, as you've mentioned, will they sue again? And the attorney sort of coyly said, well, we might just. Won't stand up to scrutiny.
The Supreme Court just said all those other powers are available to him. So I mean, they're not getting anywhere with that. I'm sure they'll try to tie the Justice Department up for years in court, but it isn't gonna matter.
And the money is not going to be refunded to people who give it up.
That's an open question. This case didn't address that.
We will follow up with you on that and much more, Rod Martin. We have to leave it at that for the moment, though. God bless you. We'll be talking with the rest of you in a moment. Stay tuned.